What is going on? This is the Strangeland Podcast. My name is Skinny, and I'm here with my good friend Stefan.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good. How about you, Stefan?
I am feeling great.
Good. I see you have that big beer over there. What are you drinking tonight?
Shiner, of course, Texas beer for Texas people.
Nice. I'm having an East
Cheers.
Sider's original dry cider, which is also a Texas beer. Well, a Texas cider. So
We're pretty authentic today.
yeah, definitely. So what are we talking about tonight, Stefan?
So in today's episode, we're going to talk about Todd and Barbara Kendhammer. This case is actually really bizarre. The trial took place in December of 2017, but before giving too much away about this case, I think that true crime lovers will really find this case both fascinating and infuriating, respectively. With that being said, most of us have seen a cheesy horror film like Final Destination with gruesome and over the top deaths. After researching this case, I found myself forced to consider if such horrible acts could actually happen in real life. The death of Barbara Kendhammer was brutal, and the trial of her husband Todd Kendhammer would be surrounded with speculation and possibility. Todd's family, who stayed by his side throughout the days of the trial, were subject to major criticism as well because of their refusal to admit that it would be possible for their dad to have anything to do with the death of their mother in light of the evidence. It's going to be difficult not to poison the well here, but I'll try my best just to give you the facts as they lay. I think it's important to come to your own conclusions based on the evidence presented, at least until the end of the show. I hope you guys all enjoy.
Early on a rainy day, September 16th, 2016, in La Crosse County, Wisconsin, police received a frantic 911 call from Todd Kendhammer. He explains that he was driving with his wife in the car when a dark green flatbed truck going in the opposite direction passed the couple on the road. Kendhammer says, he explains that a 10-pound galvanized steel pipe rolled off the truck and flew through the windshield, striking Barbara in the head and neck, critically injuring her. And you can sort of see what Stefan was talking about with the Final Destination reference. I think in the beginning of one of those movies, I think the second one, maybe, there's a truck on the highway and these big wooden logs, and they fall off and they just chop this guy's head off in a car.
Yeah, that's literally the only thing I can think about, by the way, when I was researching this and like hearing the story for the first time. I was just sort of dumbfounded.
Yeah, I feel like Todd Kendhammer just saw the movie. Anyways, he quickly tells the operator, after he calls 911, that they needed to hurry and stays on the line and complies with 911 operators waiting for police and an ambulance to arrive. When they finally do arrive at the scene moments later, they find the couple's car veered off into a ditch with Barbara laying nearby. Todd Kendhammer was found at the scene hysterical, covered in blood, and sweating profusely. His chest and his knuckles were scratched and bleeding from, at the time, unknown reasons. The police and EMTs treat the scene and a routine traffic accident, and the Kendhammers are taken to the hospital where Barbara succumbed to her wounds the next day.
So pretty crazy, man.
Yeah, so we're starting this off with, like we said, a very freak accident. I think most people can sort of relate when they're driving down the highway. They think about things. They see a truck carrying big logs or metal pipes or something, and they're like, man, what if this were to fall off and just cut my head off?
Right.
And this is what he claims happened on the 911 call and to investigators whenever police and EMTs arrive.
Todd Kendhammer is escorted to the hospital by Sergeant Mark Yaley, and on the way he tries to explain to the sergeant what happened in greater detail. Todd tells police that when the couple was driving, he saw a pipe fly off the truck and reacted as the pipe hit the windshield, subsequently punching the windshield trying to block the incoming object from hitting his wife. This, he explains, is the reason the backs of his hands are bloody and bruised. Todd said that at first he didn't know how hurt Barbara was, but when he removed the pipe that was stuck in her neck, it sent Barbara into a flailing pain. Then he claims to have pulled over, accidentally putting the car into reverse and forcing the car into a ditch, where he then pulled Barbara out of the car and into the ditch. He tries to give her chest compressions in an act to resuscitate her. After this, he finally notifies police. So just a side note here, during the car ride to the hospital, investigator Mark Yaley records a conversation between Todd and himself. While in the car, Todd would not stop talking the entire time, and it seems to me he's really uncomfortable with the silent periods in between the questions the sergeant asks him. At some point, Todd seems hysterical, telling the officer that he hopes his wife is okay, but there are other moments where he seems, at least almost to me, how I interpret it, as calm. He offers other information about his wife's depression and the dynamics of the family. Also, during the ride to the hospital, he boasts about how great the couple's relationship actually is, and how rarely the two ever have arguments. After all, they were married for 26 years.
Yeah, so this is interesting. It sort of seems like how you pointed out the fact that he can go from being in hysterics to being calm.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like whenever you see someone who's trying to be hysterical,
Right.
you know, they might or really even just trying to be anything like that. They calm down and then they forget that they're not. You know, they forget that they're, oh yeah, I'm trying to like put on an act.
Right.
You know, and then they'll start up again, and then they'll kind of.
It's hard to hide your biases. That's how I took it. But in just so I can play devil's advocate for a second, so police officers are trained to be able to calm people down. So in all fairness, that could have been what was happening too. But to me, it just seemed really odd, and he seemed like super uncomfortable. I mean, obviously his wife just died, but
yeah, and that's another thing too. His wife is dying. You know, he just had to supposedly pull out a metal pipe from her neck. And it's really hard to guess how someone's going to act in that sort of situation. It's something also whenever you see police interrogate someone.
Mm-hmm.
Me personally, I don't think I would fold under interrogation, but I would look nervous as hell even if I didn't do anything, because that's just my personality.
Right.
I'm very nervous. I'm very anxious. And you put me in front of cops interrogating me for anything, doesn't matter if I did it, I'm going to look nervous.
Right.
So it's one of those things where you don't really know how someone's personality is going to affect how they look in the future.
Right.
Yeah.
And I try and give them the benefit of doubt here. And
Definitely. On September 20th, forensic pathologist Kathleen McCubbin performs Barbara Kendhammer's autopsy. She finds numerous contusions all over her body, and McCubbin's notes that there was a fairly large area around Barbara's neck and chest that was discolored and bleeding from under the skin. There are also scratches consistent with fingernails on her neck. Barbara's face, mouth, and tongue are swollen beyond belief, and on the back of her neck and skull, she finds 3 deep lacerations with fracturing to the skull. On Barb's chin, McCubbins records that there are line-like abrasions consistent with fingernail scratches, as well as a contusion on her face on the opposite side from which the pipe had supposedly struck her. Miss Kendhammer's fingernails are broken and nose fractured along with her jawbone. A bone in her throat was also found to be broken. Forensic pathologists conclude that the cause of death for Barbara Kendhammer is blunt force trauma caused to the head.
when an examination of the car is done, they find a mug that seems to have a defect on the corner of it. Again, I'm not sure if this is like relevant information, but I just thought I would include it because it's pretty interesting for some theories we'll go over at the end. They also find a single blade of grass in the trunk. Investigators also find broken glass that was located in the gear shift of the car, and that sat between the seats and the center console, basically. Some glass had fallen down in between. In court, this piece of evidence was used against Todd because the prosecution claims that the only way this piece of glass would have been able to fall into that specific spot, the car would have had to have been in park, asserting that the windshield of the car was broken after the car was in park. No blood is found on the headrest or the backrest of the passenger seat.
Yeah, so there's, again, something else with the glass. There's no glass on the seat, right? And there's also no glass in the side pocket holder of the passenger door.
Right.
And so what that means is it's the way the glass spilt over everywhere, the glass would have been in the side on the passenger door if it had been closed.
Right.
And so what they deduce from that is the passenger door was open whenever the glass was shattered, which would show that when the glass, again, this would be another piece of evidence to show that the car was in park when the glass was shattered.
Definitely.
And also, so whenever a glass expert examined the windshield, he actually saw 2 hit marks on the glass. So basically, if Todd's story is true and the pipe came off of the truck and went through the glass, one clean stroke, there would be, one clean, I mean, not clean, there might be cracks, but there would be one hole where the pipe came in. Well, there is a hesitation mark. And what that means is it looks as if as he was trying to get the pipe to go through the windshield, he hit it and didn't hit it hard enough to break it. Okay, which makes sense because who knows if this guy has ever hit something with the windshield. If you go take a wooden bat to a windshield, you might not break it the first time. And that's what they find on this. I think that's very clear evidence to show that it took 2 tries to get this pipe to go through the glass.
Right. And doesn't he claim, though, that his fist is what caused that?
Yeah, there's no way. So defense brought in an expert. He was also another glass expert.
Right.
And basically said that in a certain time, the human body can be put into such stress that it brings out almost superhuman powers.
Totally.
Okay, so that's what he said. He said in this moment, that's how his fist was able to mark the glass like that.
Right, which I don't buy.
However, the thing is, if you look at the windshield pictures, you see where the hesitation mark is. It's further to the right on the windshield than the actual mark is. It's way far over. For one thing, I doubt he could even reach over there. Another thing, this whole idea that Todd went up to punch whatever was coming, I don't buy that at all. Anyways, I mean, what are you doing? Punching at the glass to try to stop something?
Yeah, you've never done that? You've never, when a ball comes at you, you just punch it. You don't catch it. You just punch through it. But, it's weird. And I don't really understand it either. Why would he punch the glass? Like, to me, that doesn't... And did he have time to react in the first place? That's another question. Like, humans can have superhuman strength when they're, stress induced, but he didn't have time to react to be stress induced.
Yeah, there's no way. If the pipe is coming off of a truck, they're saying that it's going at least 40 miles an hour or so.
Right.
There's no way that he has the time to react and actually punch the glass before the pipe comes through, because you have to punch the glass as the pipe's coming through the glass. It just doesn't make any sense.
It really doesn't. And one thing that I didn't mention before is Todd Kendhammer installed windshields into cars for his job. That's what he did. Just an interesting fact here.
Exactly.
Not sure if it's relevant, but...
Well, it is relevant because that's where he said he was headed to that day. Now more on evidence. So let's look at the pipe real quick. The pipe had on one side of it had some rust on it. So that rust, that same exact rust that was found on the pipe, was also found on the inside of the trunk to their car. This is a Toyota Camry. So inside the truck, they find the exact same rust on the carpet that was on the pipe. And you mentioned the piece of glass that was shut in the trunk door.
Right.
So if you look at pictures of the car and how the car is backed into this ditch, it's backed into a very tall field of grass. This grass is maybe 4 or 5 feet high. It's very tall grass. And let's say that he accidentally backs into this ditch. He gets out of the car. He runs over, gets Barbara out of the passenger seat and throws her on the ground, and then starts, performing CPR, chest compressions. He would never have gone to the trunk, right?
Right.
There's no reason for him to go to the trunk.
Yeah. Why was? Yeah. Why?
So it's proven that the trunk was open because that piece of grass is in there.
Right.
That grass is the same grass that's found in the field where the car is parked. So it's like he backed into the field, opened the trunk, closed it. A piece of grass got caught into the trunk. We also know for a fact that the pipe that was supposedly gone through the window was in the trunk because of the rust.
Right.
Yeah.
Pretty damning evidence.
Exactly. Also, there was Barbara's blood was found on the passenger rear tire.
Right.
So
in Todd's scenario here, I mean, that made sense though. You know, like
if
no.
he like brought her out and somehow got her blood on the back tire.
If blood was gushing from her, and he did mention there was sort of a struggle because she was flailing everywhere. I mean, I'm just saying it's not
Super
atypical for it to be there.
And now one more piece of evidence before we move on. I want to talk about the pipe one more time. So we've talked about the rust. We've talked about the piece of grass in the trunk.
Right.
There was no blood on the pipe. So if you listen to Todd's story, the pipe comes through the window. It hits Barbara in the neck. It gets stuck and lodged into her neck.
On the right side, right?
Yes.
Yes.
And so there's blood everywhere. He has blood all over him. She has blood all over her. She dies, of course.
Mm-hmm.
He gets out of the car. Actually, while they're still driving, he pulls the pipe out. And then he gets out of the car and pulls her out, pulls the pipe out out of the actual windshield. When they test in a laboratory, they run a blood analysis on the actual pipe, and there is no blood on the pipe. So that doesn't make any sense. How is the pipe flying through the windshield, stabbing her in the neck and sticking into her neck, and she dies from this?
Right.
And there's no blood on the pipe?
Especially if it hits you in a place where you have 3 lacerations and a fractured skull. Pipes just don't not have blood on them or any DNA evidence at all.
And also the lacerations were on the back of her head. So
yeah, exactly.
It's like how the pipe caused that.
Well, it's funny in the in court. There's a guy for the defense. The defense calls to the stand, and he tries to explain if something is flying through the windshield, and as a reaction, you sort of duck down, which would put you in a position to where
maybe you got hit.
I don't believe it. That's just
that same defense, the same person that you're quoting, or you're saying that the defense brought in, also said, the prosecutor, the general attorney, came in and said, didn't the pipe come from? Because basically it's shown how the pipe came through the glass. It came from the passenger side, so you could tell that the pipe came from the right side of the car. Right. So they're going down the road. The truck comes and passes them. So if the pipe
on the left side.
So if the pipe were to fall off the truck, for one thing, I don't see how that pipe is going to make it all the way to the passenger side of the car. Okay, if the pipe hits
physics, man.
Physics just doesn't allow it, and they prove this in court. But the pipe is not getting all the way to the passenger side, and it sure as hell is not going to get to the passenger side and then make a magical turn to the right, so it goes in at an angle as if you were stabbing them from the right.
Right.
And so that just shows that when the pipe went through the glass, it was angled coming from the passenger side, which means that it certainly looks like when that pipe went through the glass, someone was trying to make it come through the glass, standing on the passenger side of the car.
So back to the autopsy. A day after Barbara's autopsy, they actually do another evaluation of her body. So they drain the blood from her body, and then she's examined again. But Kathleen McCubbins notifies Sergeant Mark Yaley because she would like to share her findings with law enforcement. She explains that there's some injuries inconsistent with the story of what Todd Kendhammer told police. At this point in time, this is where the actual investigation regarding Todd having killed his wife takes place. And after what we just said before, it's sort of obvious. There's a lot of damning
evidence. And also something you see around her. You mentioned earlier there's bruises under her skin on her neck.
Yeah, internal. She had beneath the skin bleeding, essentially, which is like a bruise, I guess. But
like we said, how could a pipe that has no blood on it have caused internal bruising?
Right. Yeah. Well, okay. So this is actually explained in court as well by Todd, who says that he was giving her chest compressions. And also, to be fair, the autopsy was done after EMS had showed up as well, and they also performed emergency protocol on her, chest compressions, the whole 9 yards. So they don't exactly know what this was caused by, but it doesn't look like chest compression marks, because actually
they're in her neck as well.
Yeah,
that's
and
the thing.
Todd says that he was like poking her. This is what he said. He used the word poking. He didn't like give her really chest compressions because he didn't want to hurt her, so he poked her. That's what he said. So, after the month following the death of Barbara Kendhammer, investigator Mark Yaley and Fritz Leinfelder would eventually get Todd Kendhammer to come into the police station after telling him they wanted to review some footage that they had recovered. This was a lie. The forensic pathologist who performed Barbara's autopsy, as well as investigators, recognized the inconsistencies in Todd's report of what happened in relationship to her injuries. Yaley admitted in court that he didn't want to risk spooking Kendhammer and having him leave the area unable to question. So, they resort to deceiving tactics in order to contain him, at least for the time being. They now have Todd right where they want him, and will do their best to pry the information of what happened to Barbara on that day. In fact, while he's at the police station, they actually don't show him any footage at all. As soon as he gets there, they just go right into the questioning.
Yep. And remember, he could ask for a lawyer at any time, and he could also leave. He wasn't under arrest.
Right.
And he was there for 3.5 hours.
And they let him know that as well, and he stuck around.
Exactly. So during this interview, they make Todd recall the events that took place on September 16th. Todd tells the police that him and Barbara were traveling to a co-worker's house, Justin Heim, so he could drop off a windshield. They were not arguing that day, and the conversation that they were having was pleasant. As they were going down the road, they passed a dark-colored flatbed pickup. In that split moment, he described seeing what he, at the time, thought was a bird crash through the windshield. Of course, we now know that this was the galvanized steel pipe. As he tries to shield his wife from the blow, he acts accordingly and makes a punching motion towards the incoming object and scrapes his hands in the process. The pipe, rolling off the truck, flies straight through the windshield and causes the damage on the back of Barbara's face and neck. While still driving, he attempts to remove the pipe that was stuck into Barbara, and after he does so, it sends her into an immense pain. He then turns off the highway onto a smaller road where he attempts to pull over slowly, but accidentally backs the car into a ditch as he is trying to get out of the car. He then tries to get Barbara out of the car to perform emergency resuscitation. During this time, Todd said she was spitting up blood and gasping for air. Todd says that he took off his shirt to try and stop Barbara's bleeding by putting it on the back of her head. And after that, he calls 911.
When asked about the truck's details, he couldn't recall anything other than it was a dark color. He can't recall the position of the pipe or if he had taken the pipe out of the windshield when he pulled over to get Barb out of the car. When asked to show police how she started flailing, Todd wouldn't explain what it looked like, which honestly is fair. Even if he did hypothetically kill his wife, it's probably not it's a traumatic experience either way.
And
so,
it'd be kind of hard to describe your dead wife's flailing around.
Right. He doesn't want to recall on that, so that's understandable. Todd also offers that Barb always wore her seatbelt, but can't recall if she was wearing it at the time he took her out of the car. During the investigations, Todd stumbles, stutters, and repeats himself many times throughout the interview. Another interesting thing that I found peculiar was that during the entirety of the investigation and interrogation, Todd keeps both of his hands on his head completely, and his knee is just shaking out of control, going back and forth. Like you said earlier, maybe that's just a nervous personality, but others interpret that as deception.
Todd acts confused at some moments and saddened at others during this interview. When questioned about if he ever got physical with Barb, Todd answers, "Never. I would never hurt her," and that he would do anything for her. Eventually, Yelly explains that some of the injuries were inconsistent with a pipe coming through the windshield. Kendhammer then gets defensive and at one point says that he doesn't even know how Barbara got all those injuries. When the investigators press him even harder and tell Kendhammer that they know he is lying and they found blood in the garage, which was another half-truth told by the police to Todd, one of the investigators who was performing a search at the property was said to have found evidence of a possible bloodstain in the garage. It isn't stated if there was actually any blood found of Todd or Barbara that we know of. So Todd doubles down and explains again that he wouldn't hurt her and that he would gladly agree to the search of the garage. After hours of interrogation and letting the cops take a cheek swab to collect his DNA, Todd Kendhammer leaves the sheriff's office a free man. However, on Thursday, December 15th, 2016, Todd Kendhammer is charged with intentional first-degree homicide during a preliminary hearing and bond was set at $250,000. On Friday, December 16th, 2016, Todd would bond out, but not before being set on house arrest and being equipped with a GPS ankle monitor.
So they were able to sort of pin him at least for, a while.
Exactly. And I want to talk about real quick another piece of evidence that, it might come up later in the podcast, but so we talked, of course, about the pipe and the windshield and everything that happened, all the injuries to Barbara.
Right.
Another piece of evidence, and this to me is one of the most damning pieces of evidence that there is. So on this farm road where the incident supposedly occurred, where the actual pipe went through the windshield, a couple miles before, back from where that incident occurred, there's a farm, and this farm had surveillance video cameras. It's just security cameras.
Right.
Well, the investigators went to this farm. They got the security cameras. Now, the incident happened very early in the morning. It was around 8:30, I believe.
Yep.
Something like that. And on this camera, on this video tape, they see the Kendhammer's Camry drive by. And so what they're looking for is the Camry to drive by and then any type of flatbed truck to drive by. Or any type of truck at all.
Right.
And they don't see anything. So they see the Camry and then they see the ambulance. How long after that? Maybe 10 or 15 minutes after the Camry goes by, they see an ambulance. So to me, this is just proof that there was no truck. If there had been a truck, if there had been a truck and Todd's story was correct and a pipe fell off of the back and went through the windshield and killed Barbara, and the truck didn't stop when it realized the pipe came off, it would have went past the camera.
Right.
And there's no evidence of that. And again, I just want to reiterate that this to me is a big deal. They would have seen this truck. And to me, it's just he seems like he made the whole truck out of thin air. Because if he hadn't, it would have been on the camera.
Are you calling him a liar, Kenny?
Well,
I guess the evidence
calls
speaks
it
for itself.
as I sees it.
I think that's fair.
Which is very ironic, actually, because in the investigation, or not in the investigation, but in the interview at the police station, the one we were just talking about,
right.
He actually tells the investigators, "Let the evidence speak for itself. I would never."
And it does. It speaks so loud.
Yeah, seriously.
He
doesn't even see his own irony in that statement.
Right.
Or he does, and he's just trying to play fools with the investigators.
I'm going to mention this too. If anyone hasn't heard of this case, go and look at his interrogation tapes and the court tapes. They are very interesting. This guy's voice, I don't know what it is about his voice, but it is the worst. It was hard to sit through all of the courtroom footage. It's rough.
Are you judging this entire trial and case over a man's voice, Stefan?
Yes.
Oh, no, we're just kidding.
All right, so I guess from here, we'll just cover the trial. Like I said, we're trying so hard not to poison the well here, but it is what it is, guys.
And when I was going over this, I was going over a lot of it today just before we came up here, so I can sort of remember.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just sending you texts back and forth. I'm just like, and this, and this, and this, and what
Yep.
the hell? So I'm not. So we're trying to explain this unbiased, but
It's so ridiculous.
it is
though.
pretty ridiculous. The story itself is pretty ridiculous.
It's hard to take anything this guy says seriously. Like, he expects you to believe the most crazy freak accident that could have possibly ever been imagined. And
It was imagined on a Final Destination movie.
I would say staged. Either way, in both cases, it was staged.
Exactly. One was just performed on a stage.
Yeah, exactly. So now I guess we're gonna get into the trial a little bit. Instead of describing every day of the trial in acute detail, we're just gonna briefly summarize each day, talking about who took the stand and any interesting facts that came out. So the trial took place over a 9-day period in mid-December of 2017 in the La Crosse County Courthouse. Todd Kendhammer would stick to his story, stating that he had not killed Barb and this was just a freak accident. A section of seats inside the courtroom were set aside for family members and friends of Barb who attended in wish of justice for her. But none of those seats were used at all, as the family members and friends of both Barbara and Todd sat on the other side of the room in defense of Todd. Anyway, here's what happened during the days of the trial. So on the first day of the trial, the opening statements were made, and each side tries to make their points to the jury. Pretty simple. On the second day of the trial, the testimony begins. The start of the second day would begin with jurors visiting the crime scene of the crash, and jurors were also allowed to hear the 911 call and get to see police dash cam footage when the police arrived and assessed the scene.
On the third day, the prosecutors attack the alibi of Todd Kendhammer. The jury is able to view the interrogation tapes where Todd is seemingly visibly uncomfortable, knees shaking up and down the whole time. Justin Heim was testifying on the stand when he claimed that he had told Kendhammer a month before that he needed a windshield but had no contact with Todd the day of the death of Barbara. Another interesting thing that happened was that the jury was introduced to the steel pipe that penetrated the windshield. Following Heim, Randy Erler testified about coming upon the vehicle that morning. He said he drove past the vehicle sitting partially in a ditch. He said he drove by the car about 4 or 5 miles an hour but didn't stop. And he said the passenger side door was open and that he saw that it was open by looking through the windshield. When asked by La Crosse County District Attorney Tim Grunke if he saw that any damage to the windshield had been done, he said, "No, I did not." Erler said he would have stopped if he saw any kind of damage. After seeing no one, he simply drove off. And that is a huge piece of evidence. That is another piece. That is another gigantic piece of evidence.
Yep.
So a little backstory on that, real quick. How they even found this guy? They put out a public announcement asking for anyone that morning who had gone down that road to get in contact with investigators and police. He did.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this guy, like I just said, he drove past the car, past the incident, and he saw the car was already in the ditch. He saw the passenger door open, and he said that the windshield was intact. There was no pipe, there was no hole that the pipe had gone through. There was no cracking. There was no anything.
Right. The car was just in the ditch. Nothing seemed to be, obviously gone wrong. He just passed a car that was in a ditch with the door open.
Yeah, and this is very strange. On one hand, we look at this and say, okay, the windshield is intact. The car is already in the ditch.
Right.
What does this mean? This means that Todd made it up and that he killed his wife and that he, put the pipe through after the car was parked.
Mm-hmm.
But where was Todd and Barbara during this time?
That's the question.
Because the driver said he didn't see anybody. He didn't see anyone on the ground. He didn't see anything. It's very interesting.
Yeah, we don't know.
Now there is tall grass.
Sure.
He could have been hiding her in the grass when he saw a car coming.
This ditch didn't look like it seems to be like when you rode by at 4 or 5 miles an hour just creeping, you would be able to see somebody. Like with the if you look at the actual footage of the crime scene and where the car was parked, it doesn't look like, this isn't a deep ditch. It's just a little ditch off of the side of the road. Nothing steep where you couldn't see anyone.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
So on the fourth day of the trial, one of the people called to the stands was Fritz Leinfelder, an investigator with the La Crosse County Sheriff's Department, who was actually one of the people who was interrogating Todd Kendhammer. On the fifth day of the trial, Nick Stalkey, a crime lab analyst, takes the stand, saying that there was an impact on the windshield made by the pipe before it went through. Next to testify was Kevin Scott, a DNA analyst, with the Wisconsin Crime Lab. He told the jury about the fingernail clippings taken from Barb Kendhammer. His analysis showed that there was blood on both of her hands.
On the sixth day of the trial, the defense calls their own glass expert to the stand in an attempt to disprove the findings of the state crime lab. Barry Bates, a biomechanics consultant, when questioned by the defense, stated that Barbara's injuries were consistent with the pipe impaling the car windshield. He proposed that the natural reaction to something flying at you is to instinctively duck down, which, in this case, would explain why her neck and back of her head were exposed to the pipe. However, during cross-examination, Bates clarifies that he doesn't believe the defense's story because of the time it would take the pipe to travel from the truck into the car. His exact quote is, "The pipe would have to come off of the truck going 20 miles an hour horizontally, parallel to the road. It had to get forced somehow to go 20 miles an hour across the road to strike a windshield in 0.35 seconds. And I don't think there's no bias for that at all in any of the data I have reviewed. And also, going kind of into that, they did tests. Stefan, did you read about this?
Like them trying to recreate the crime? Yeah, and I saw the videos as well as...
and they couldn't do it, could they?
No, they could not. So, they failed miserably every single time.
So I think they tried 6 times?
Yep.
They tried 6 times to recreate exactly what happened with all the same physics, the same car driving down the road, a truck with the pipe, and could never even get it close to working.
Right, and it does essentially, the pipe does what you would think it would do, right? As it comes off of the truck, it doesn't fly to the other side of the road. It falls down. They essentially have it on a roller, so they roll it off of this ledge, like on the truck, and as soon as the pipe leaves the truck, it falls straight down as physics would dictate, and sort of, it bounces around when it hits the pavement, but it's not flying anywhere.
And it's not going to bounce. I mean, how high is a Camry, right? Probably about 3 or 4 feet up.
Right.
So it would have to roll off the truck, bounce on the ground, and then bounce 3 or 4 feet up all in one motion and then go through the window. Which just didn't happen in the tests.
Right, and
it's not bouncing that high.
Yeah, you see the pipe, and it does sort of like get some height on one of the test runs, but the force isn't as great. Like when the pipe bounces, it's going straight up, essentially. So there's no way it could have flown through the windshield at that force, at least.
Yeah, the force after once it hits the ground, it's going to lose a lot of force. So even once it hits the ground, it's not going to come back up and be going the same speed as it was before it hit the ground.
Right.
So like you said, there's just not enough force for it to hit the ground and then go through the windshield. Thought I should mention that because they were talking about it.
Definitely. So the 7th day of the trial, Todd Kendhammer takes the stand. He answers questions about the day in question and regarding Barbara's death. He is seen with a permanent frown on his face, visibly shaken and crying at moments. Todd describes when he kept telling his wife in the hospital how much he loved her. He wears his wedding ring, and when asked about why he's wearing it, he replies, "Because I love Barb." On day 8, the defense attempts to portray Todd as a family man. The day began with a brief cross-examination of Jordan Kendhammer, Todd and Barb's son. Next to testify was Tina McCoy, who was Barb's best friend. When questioned, she said that Barb never complained about Todd or anything that he did. She also testified that she never saw any visible injuries on Barb at all when they were together. Many other family members and close friends would testify, and all of them shared a similar story, that Todd was a loving, caring father. A husband who would never abuse his wife or family. And right after this, the defense rests its case.
So on the 9th day of trial, December 15th, 2017, Todd Kendhammer is found guilty. And about 3 months later, in March of 2018, he is sentenced to life in prison, although he could be eligible for release after a 20-year minimum sentence if a judge made the call. And also, the only reason, or the only way he could be released is if he admits fault and he admits that he killed his wife. So he has to admit that. I mean, I don't think that's a law, but basically this judge said that no judge is going to release you after 20 years unless you admit that you did this.
Right.
And, you know, right now it is April 2018.
So this happened recently. This is
he was just
relevant.
sentenced 2 months ago.
Yeah.
And, of course, this happened in late 2016. It was September 2016 that this happened, the 17th, I believe.
Right.
So, yeah, this is all just very recent. And something else the judge said that, you know, the defense has this whole thing about how he was a good family man and he was a good father and he was a good husband and all this stuff. And all the family members and friends said that they never saw them argue. They never saw anything. But the thing is no one knows exactly what's happening behind closed doors.
Right.
100
That's every story of abuse ever. Like
Ever.
when you find out, you know, someone was being abused, you were, you know,
Like, what? They were
yeah.
perfect, you know?
Really? They look so happy.
Like,
I
you
mean,
think-
that's so typical.
Yeah, do you think that he's going to hit her or even argue that much in public? I mean, people just don't do that.
Right.
And something that the judge said was, you know, no one knows what happens behind closed doors, and I believe that you just snapped.
Yeah.
And I believe that you are guilty, and you know, he basically sided with the jury's opinion on this case.
Totally. How could you not, in a sense?
Yeah.
So let's hear your theories. Okay, so this is the end. This is the end of the story. But now, without we did our best to just tell the facts as they were. But now let's speculate. What do you think happened?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm going to let the evidence speak for everything, which is really easy to do because there's so much overwhelming evidence against Todd. So let's go over everything again. So in his theory, the pipe came off the truck, went through the windshield, hit her in the neck.
Right.
What we know, there was no blood on the pipe. Okay,
Seats.
Or seats. There's only blood on the middle console and all over Todd and all over Barbara, of course.
Right.
But the thing is if this pipe went through the windshield and stuck into Barbara's neck and enough to kill her, there's going to be no blood on the pipe. That makes absolutely no sense. It is impossible. I sent that to you in a text today. I said, it is impossible for this pipe to have got into her neck and killed her without there being blood on the pipe.
Agreed.
There's just no way.
Yep.
There's no blood. And then also on the pipe there was rust, right? So there's rust on this pipe. When investigators investigated the car, they went into the trunk and they found the exact same type of rust inside the trunk that was on the pipe. It shows that the pipe was in the trunk. And also, like we said, there was tall grass. So when he backed up into the tall grass, we know the trunk was open because some of the grass was now inside the trunk.
Right.
Like he opened it, the grass went in, he closed it, it got stuck in there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why would he go back and open the trunk? Well, maybe because the pipe was in there.
What do you think he did? You think he just broke the windshield with the pipe?
What do you mean?
I mean, so you said there's no DNA or blood on the pipe, right? How do you think that he killed her?
So my best guess is strangulation of some sort.
Right.
And he also beat her.
Yeah.
And so I don't think he beat her to death. I think that he beat her, I think the ultimate cause was strangulation. And you can just see that through the bruises on the neck. And there is no way. Okay, for one thing, the guy that the defense brought in, who said that maybe Barbara ducked down, and that's why there's lacerations on the back of her head from the pipe. That's not happening.
Right.
I'm sorry, but that's
bullshit.
I mean, for one thing, we've already shown that this guy, his testimony is complete shit, anyways, right?
Yeah.
And just that thing he said, it just doesn't make any sense. The pipe's not hitting her in the back of the head to cause 3 lacerations.
Yeah, I mean, how much is this pipe really moving if it's stuck in her neck? Well, like, why does she have 3 lacerations?
And also stuck in the windshield.
Yeah.
The pipe's not moving around. It goes right through the windshield, hits her in the neck. It's not hitting her in the back or in the head or anything else.
Right.
It's hitting her in the neck, according to Todd.
I give that guy props, who the defense's glass expert, because he did admit later, he was just like, I don't see this even happening.
Yeah,
Like, to be honest, I don't know how this is. Either this is a once in a lifetime sort of event, or there's foul play.
And so the last 2 pieces of evidence I want to go over again is the videotape. We saw the Camry, we saw the ambulance, we never saw a truck. The truck didn't exist. And the guy who drove his car slowly past their car, which was already in the ditch, with the windshield completely intact and the passenger door open. To me, this is case closed. This is he did it. Now, how? I mean, the only question I really have is, did he kill her at the scene, or did he kill her somewhere else and bring her to the scene?
Right.
Honestly, I don't really have a good explanation for that. I don't know if you do. But I think that she died from strangulation, a mixture of beating, because he did beat her, and he
Right.
set the whole thing up. And I think it's plainly obvious that he set it up. I think the whole idea of this, everything is completely ludicrous. And I hope that one day he comes forward and admits to what he's done.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. So basically, where I stand, I know this is going to be sort of a shock to the listeners, but surprise, he did it. He in my opinion, he definitely did it. So he killed her. In my opinion, I don't know where he killed her, right? We don't have the information to be able to say, but to me, he killed her either at the house or at another location. It could have been the ditch where the car was. Either way, so... But the main focus on this is that this man staged a freak accident and killed his wife.
And he didn't even do a good job of it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
He didn't even do a good job.
Especially for a windshield install. You think this would be as in and out, he would have some sort of competitive edge.
Well, that's why he probably thought of it.
Right.
I guarantee you, he probably saw... I'd make a joke about the Final Destination thing, but he probably saw the Final Destination thing. And then, I don't know. He's working on windshields all day.
Maybe that was just sitting in the back of his mind.
Maybe.
And he was like, that could be possible.
Another piece of evidence that we kind of went over a little bit, but not fully, were the scratches on him. He had scratches on his neck and face.
Mm-hmm.
And now he claims that he's working with windshields all day. He gets cut.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with this theory is you're not getting cut on your neck. And
Right.
you're not getting cut on your face. I mean, what are you doing with windshields that's causing lacerations and scrapes and cuts on your face and neck?
Right.
I could see maybe if you work with windshields and you're repairing them and you're doing things, maybe you have cuts on your arms and maybe you have cuts in your hands. Completely makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But on your face and neck, come
yeah,
on.
I don't
man,
think
that's-
anybody was buying that. Okay, so to me, this is interesting evidence to me, right? So let's take Todd's story. Let's say if Todd is telling the truth, there's a really big inconsistency here. So during the car ride to the hospital that we talked about, Todd explains he doesn't remember when he pulled over, when he took the pipe out of the windshield itself. He doesn't know if he took the pipe out. He can't remember if he took it out after he got Barb out. Either way, this is interesting. There's no blood on the outside of the windshield, which is not consistent with if a if a pipe impales a windshield into a person and you remove the pipe, there's going to be DNA evidence suggesting that a pipe with DNA exited the hole, right?
Yeah, and there's no blood on the pipe either. I
Yeah.
think like those two things are just
Exactly.
like how do you not see that this, I'm just saying.
Well, I think we're pretty much representing every juror in the trial, basically.
Oh,
It's like,
definitely.
come on, like, how much do you expect us to really believe you're innocent when, I mean, if he is lying, which I believe he is, he's basically just sort of like saying "fuck you" to the jury.
Oh yeah, he's saying fuck you to everyone, including his own children,
Right.
and including all of his family members. And so, do you think that? How do you think she actually died? How do you think he actually killed her?
The more and more I think about it, the more and more I think about the guy driving by and not seeing anybody, it leads me to believe that in my mind, this is where my mind goes. So in my mind, I picture them driving down the Highway M is what it's called. I picture them driving down the highway and them being in an accident, and maybe it's so crazy because it's such a weird sort of sequence of events, but I think he definitely killed her like at the scene. I think he may have even drug her back into the woods, into a wooded area that was close and no one could see what was happening. Now I think that the forensic team had it right when they said that Barb died of head trauma. Like, and I also saw the autopsy photos, and the pictures of this woman's face are unbearable. Her entire lips are blown out. Like, where the inside of your lip would be are so swollen. They're outside of her face. And blue and purple.
And a single strike to the neck from a pipe's doing all that?
Right.
And also, he has bruises and blood on his knuckles. I mean, you see pictures of his knuckles. He puts them out like this. Blood and bruises
Scratches
everywhere.
on his neck and chest. It's almost like, he was pinning her in the ditch, strangling her, and she was literally clawing for her life. Like, that was Barb's last message.
That's a good way of putting it. Maybe she did die from beating. I mean, honestly, her face is that fucked up, and his knuckles are so bruised and bloody. I mean, it looks like he just beat her to death.
Right.
As sad as that is, and then has the nerve to, I don't know, go to court and just pretend all of this in front of his family.
Yeah. It's pretty hard to imagine a scenario where Todd Kendhammer is actually innocent. And I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt, really. I tried to look at it in sort of like the most objective way I could bring myself to. But even then, considering the facts just makes me believe even more that he's guilty. It's impossible to get around it. But, okay, so now that we have our theories out here, I just had a couple questions I wanted to ask you, just because I'm curious about your answers to them, right? So,
Sure.
And I'll answer them too, whatever. Question 1. Did Todd love his wife? It's a speculation, everybody. Like, I get it, but I'm curious to see what Kenny says.
Not at the time that he killed her. Like, look, I'm sure that they were in love. They were married for over 20 years, right?
26 years.
26 years. So I'm sure he loved her at some point. Who knows? It's very hard to speculate exactly why this happened, exactly why he killed his wife. They didn't really show any insurance reasons, correct? I didn't see anything like that.
Nope.
Which happens a lot. But it's really hard to speculate, but maybe. It's really hard to say exactly why this happened and exactly why he killed her.
Yeah. So I'm sort of with you there. I think I give him the benefit of the doubt, right? It's pretty twisted, but I think Todd Kendhammer loved his wife. I don't think he's lying about that. but
I do think he's exaggerating all of that shit, though.
I take the judge's sort of point of view with this. Like, there was something that happened that caused this chain of events, and I think the first thing that happened that caused this chain was him snapping. I just don't see how it could have happened any other way.
Definitely.
Because it definitely wasn't a pipe. It definitely wasn't a pipe that came through the windshield. Okay, so that's question one. Question two, we may have covered this a little bit, but do you think it's likely that they were fighting moments before Barb's death? Or do you think that it was sort of him himself that just snapped?
No, I think it was him himself that snapped. I also think there's a higher percentage chance that he planned this out, personally.
Fair enough.
I think that he planned this for some time, maybe not very long, but something in his head went off, and for some reason he planned to kill his wife. Maybe not months before, maybe not even a week before, but I think he planned it a little bit.
Right.
And if he killed her somewhere else and brought her to the scene, that means he definitely planned it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think he had an idea. Like, at the very least, he had some sort of idea about what he was doing and what was about to take place. I can't say for sure what those things are, but it seems to be that he knew.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so my last question here is sort of weird. It's a weird way to put it here, but was it right for police to have lied to Todd in order to get a confession out of him, or try to get a confession out of him?
That's completely subjected to
and it's law, right?
Yeah.
So it's not illegal. Like, they can do that. Yeah. I'm just asking you, what do you think about it?
No, not really. I don't think so, because if he felt threatened, he could have left. He wasn't under arrest.
At any time.
He could have lawyered up
and they told him
left. I mean, that's the thing. They bring you in, and one thing that I'll always say is lawyer up.
Right.
Dude, because, you don't know.
Yeah.
You more than likely don't, unless you are a lawyer, you more than likely don't have the educational skills, the mindset, the skills to just answer questions on your own. They can ask some real fucky questions.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and so it's something that you probably are not experienced to handle. So lawyer up no matter what.
And he didn't confess, but to say this, there has been a lot of confessions the police have gotten out of people who didn't actually commit the crime. That's the only
most
reason,
definitely. That's the reason why I say that, is because, in this particular instance, he didn't go down right away, but he went down shortly after, and tons of people give false confessions based on what investigators and interrogators say to you.
Yeah, totally.
Because they don't have the mindset to deal with that. They don't have the mindset to answer the questions correctly.
Right.
So for everyone listening, look, if you're still listening, because we're almost at an hour, lawyer up, just do it. Some people say it makes you look guilty. That's just bullshit. It doesn't.
Yeah.
Just do it because it's the good thing to do.
And more importantly, don't do what Todd did.
Yeah, don't do what Todd did. One thing I want to talk about, so we're at the very end. If anyone listens to this, awesome. Thank you for listening to the entire thing. One thing I want to talk about last is a psychology sort of standpoint coming from the victims themselves, which in this case, of course, not only was it Barbara who was killed, but the victims also spread out further than just the murder victim. We're talking about Barbara's family.
Totally.
And of course, their children. And they're all for Todd. Now, this is interesting because if you listen to the entire podcast and you heard all the evidence, you know that he did this. You know that there is stacks and stacks and stacks of non-circumstantial evidence, physical evidence to show that he did this.
Right.
And yet, his whole family, and her family too, is blinded by that. And it's really interesting to think about. Just think about that. Everyone listening at home, just think about how weird that is. It's hard. It's really hard to imagine this happening. So it's hard to say exactly how I would feel if this exact scenario happened between my parents who are still together and who've been married for about the same amount of time that they've been married. If this happened, it's hard to say how I would react. But I would hope that I would look at the evidence and at least try to come to a conclusion. I hope that one day they can, because I believe it will bring some type of closure to everyone.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, that's in the beginning, I talked about how infuriating this could be. And really, that's to me the most infuriating part about this is like the family, in light of the evidence, was unwilling to accept that he had done this. But you can't explain it in any other way. It doesn't make sense
Yeah,
any other way. You try to frame it.
And he's just selfish. And he's not letting his family have her family and his children and their children, have closure on this
Right.
by not admitting to it. And like I said earlier, if he wants to be released, he's more than likely going to have to admit to the murder of his wife. So
Yeah, we'll see how that goes.
yeah.
Something tells me that's going to be a hard one.
So what are we talking about next week? Colleen Stan.
Colleen Stan.
The kidnapping of Colleen Stan. This next week, we are talking about something so fucked up. I'm really starting to put down a lot of notes on it, and it's pretty hard. I think honestly, it's probably the hardest one for me. You said BTK was pretty hard for you.
Yeah.
This one's really hard, man. I mean, what happened to Colleen is bad. I mean, it was just so bad that the FBI looked at her case and used it to try to figure out how people can survive torture.
Wow.
I mean, and they still use it to this day.
That's nuts.
And it's really bad. So that will come out next week. If you're interested in that, tune in. It's going to be great. We typically release on Wednesdays, sometimes Thursdays. But if you're subscribed to us on Apple Podcasts, on Google Play, on Stitcher Radio, on any of the podcast apps, it will automatically notify you. So subscribe to us there. Go to www.strangelandpod.com. That's our website. And email us if you want. Our email is thestrangelandpodcast@gmail.com.
Definitely. And make sure you guys sub on the YouTube page. If, you guys are listening on YouTube, leave some comments, like and subscribe, all that good stuff.
Facebook too.
Yeah, the more data we have to go off of and feedback, the better. So let us know how you guys like the show.
Dude, we need feedback.
Yeah.
Email
totally.
us. I check it every day. Swear to God.
We want to hear from you.
All right, you guys have a good night.
Thanks, guys.